Hello and welcome to the Capitol Report on NTD Television. I'm Steve Lance. The latest release of Twitter files revealing that the platform was pressured by the federal government to suppress information around the CCP virus. Posts about the vaccine blocked for differing from the CDC's guidelines. This as Republicans plan to probe the FBI for coordinating with Twitter to block certain political content. Here's NTD's Melina Wisecup with more.
The federal government last year spoke openly about its expectations for big tech and COVID misinformation.
We're asking them to operate with greater transparency and accountability. We're asking them to consistently take action against misinformation super spreaders on their platforms.
And while social media platforms did flag and censor certain virus and vaccine content, the White House wanted more. The latest Twitter file showing that some White House officials were very angry that Twitter didn't deplatform enough accounts and warned the firm to do more. This is according to a summary of meetings from Twitter's head of public policy. Furthermore, a former FBI official and then Twitter general counsel James Baker asked in an email directed to Twitter's former head of security and safety why Trump's post saying "don't be afraid of COVID" wasn't flagged or taken down. In addition, House Republicans are probing Twitter's coordination with the FBI. Representative Jim Jordan saying the committee will try to uncover the politics in the agency.
Because remember, 2016 it was Trump-Russia, 2018 it was the Mueller investigation, 2020 it was suppression of the Hunter Biden story.
Recent releases from journalist Matt Taibbi suggest that the FBI assigned staffers to look for violations of Twitter's terms of service in order to suspend certain accounts. Former FBI official and then Twitter lawyer James Baker wrote in a November 2020 message that it is, quote, odd that the FBI is searching for violations of our policies. The FBI responding to these allegations say conspiracy theorists are trying to damage the Bureau's work. And Representative Jim Jordan, who's soon to be the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, has already laid that groundwork for that investigation into the Twitter files. He's given the FBI less than a month to provide the committee with relevant materials. This includes any conversations that FBI employees or contractors may have had with Twitter around content moderation. He's also asking for the names of employees from other government agencies like the DOJ, DHS, and the White House who may have had similar conversations with Twitter about content. Jordan is also asking for any materials regarding money transfers between the FBI and Twitter or other social media platforms from 2016 until present. So these just give some hints into the direction that the House Judiciary Committee will take once they launch this investigation after the new year. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Melina Wisecup, NTD News.
China is launching its latest round of military threats against Taiwan. That's in response to a defense bill that President Biden passed last week. NTD's Iris Tao brings us the latest.
Kicking off military drills, sending a record number of fighter jets, firing off a diplomatic statement, China is blasting the U.S. over its latest show of support for Taiwan. This comes after President Biden last week signed an over $800 billion defense bill. The bill would authorize up to $10 billion in military aid to Taiwan, with the aim of helping it deter aggression by Beijing. While Taiwan praises the passage of the bill, the Chinese Communist Party is firing back with threats. According to Taiwan's defense ministry, within just the last day, China sent 71 warplanes toward the island, amounting to the largest reported incursion to date. China then called the drill a response to collusion and provocations by Taiwan and the U.S. The White House, meanwhile, is condemning China. According to the Associated Press, a spokesperson for the National Security Council says China's latest activity is destabilizing, risks miscalculations, and undermines regional peace and stability. The official, who commented anonymously, added that the U.S. will continue to assist Taiwan in maintaining its sufficient self-defense capability in line with the U.S.'s long-standing commitments. Reporting from the White House, Iris Tao, NTD News.
Leaked notes from Chinese health officials suggesting the country is suffering the world's largest COVID outbreak to date. Meanwhile, China is set to drop restrictive measures, including quarantining for international travelers. According to Bloomberg and the Financial Times, health officials discussed the crisis at an internal meeting. and they estimated almost 250 million people may have contracted COVID-19 in the first 20 days of December. That's far greater than the 62,000 cases officially reported. Nearly 3 years of zero COVID policy has potentially left the Chinese population with less natural immunity, and the regime recently relaxing measures in response to widespread protests. Today, China announced it will drop the quarantine requirement for all international travelers from January 8th. It also plans to stop other restrictive COVID measures, such as quarantine for positive patients, tracing close contacts in designated risk areas. For now, people arriving from outside of China need to undergo 5 days of hotel quarantine and 3 days of self-isolation at home. Welcome back to NTD's Capital Report. I'm Steve Lance. When students return to West Point for the spring semester, they'll no longer see Confederate monuments or images on campus. Workers are removing the items during the holiday break, including a portrait of Confederate General Robert E. Lee in the school library that shows him wearing a Confederate uniform. The Military Academy announced the plan in a letter sent to the West Point community last week. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin approved the changes last October. They're part of the recommendations proposed by the congressionally mandated Naming Commission. The commission's mission is to remove all names, symbols, and monuments that honor the Confederacy from U.S. military facilities. In recent years, American society appears to have been thrust into the middle of a culture war over various social issues. Many of these appear to be human rights issues, such as the trans movement or the Black Lives Matter movement. However, some have warned that behind these groups lies a Marxist agenda. One of the foremost scholars of Marxism and communism and how these ideologies have gained a foothold in American society is James Lindsay. He's also an author and host of the podcast series New Discourses. Recently, I sat down with James and had a chance to ask him about some of his greatest concerns facing our culture and civil society.
Obviously, everybody's got their eyes on this stuff with the queer theory, with the drag queens. I'm very concerned. If you ask what my top concern is, I'm watching the way that the left is trolling for media stories, for things that happen. I'm watching how they're constructing their narratives, and I'm calling what I'm afraid of the drag Floyd event. George Floyd happened. I think they're trying to provoke for there to be an event, probably a violent event involving a drag queen or a trans person or something, that they turn into a similar kind of huge narrative push about rising anti-LGBT hate and all of this stuff that they're trying to lay the groundwork for. And they'll use it, in my opinion, to try to put a clamp on Twitter now that Elon Musk has taken it over. Almost all the articles point back to Elon as the cause of it. So it'll be used to try to justify heavy-handed government action to try to get all the social media more and more and more compliant with censorship and everything else that they want it to be.
This big push, in the trans movement seems to have evolved out of nowhere. Could you kind of break it down for us? What's behind it?
It didn't evolve out of nowhere. It's just that nobody was paying attention. The trans movement, the whole thing is rooted in I laugh because it's not real, academic theory called queer theory that actually emerged officially in 1984 with a paper called Thinking Sex by a woman named Gail Rubin. And in that paper, she talks about the things we're living through today. She talks about that child porn. We shouldn't be criminalizing that. She talks about boy love and how people that are boy lovers, pedophiles, can't be treated, with full basic dignity and human rights, that they're discriminated against or stigmatized. She talks about how people should be not discriminated against for wearing fetish gear to work. And now we have, Sam Brinton. Sorry for his career, I suppose, stealing clothing from airport carousels or whatever. She talks about these kind of things, cross-generational sexual relationships, which again, we see the pedophilia. This is from 1984. It's building off of the theories of Michel Foucault, who was writing about sexuality in the 70s, even the 60s a little bit, going into the early 80s. This isn't new. We just haven't been paying attention to it. And it has erupted in the last, I don't know, 6 to 8 months in a way that once it started to get spotted that it was happening in the schools, the genderbread person or whatever they call it, the gender unicorn or rhinoceros or whatever they have, once that started to get called out in the schools, they went full blast, and it's drag queen story hour, everything, everywhere, as a concentrated push.
And what do you think the agenda is, or ultimately the end game, if you will?
I mean, I mentioned that there is the agenda to create a provocation, to create a reaction, to capitalize upon the reaction for political and social ends, so a drag Floyd incident. But as far as the theory itself goes, what is it if there is no reaction? It's to destabilize individuals and their connections to their family, their faith, and their culture. That's what it boils down to. If you sexualize children or you bring sexual topics into the children, it's not developmentally appropriate. It destabilizes them psychologically, emotionally. They've attacked childhood psychology to make sure, developmental psychology to make sure that they can still get around the fact that we know that that's inappropriate for children. So it's to destabilize them psychologically so they'll be useful activists. But then also, if you sexualize children, they'll divorce from their parents. Their parents are the thing they have to be protected from. The school, the club at the school, or whatever it is that'll socially transition them behind their parents' back is the thing that will protect them. So you separate them from their parents and bring them into what they call in the literature alternate modes of kinship, whether through an institution, whether through a so-called queer family or whatever else. And again, faith and prevailing American culture don't agree with these things. So you make the kids say, well, we got to get rid of faith in American culture and have a new culture.
You've researched these topics thoroughly to get to, the answers that you're providing. How would you say, or do you say, that critical race theory, SEL, social emotional learning, this queer theory, are they all tied together? Yeah, so the best metaphor I have for that is that social emotional learning is like the hypodermic needle that injects the critical race theory and the queer theory and the disability and all the other stuff into the kids, among some other things that it does, equity framing, sustainability framing, global citizenship topics that they hit. But CRT and queer theory work together as a 1-2 punch, where CRT makes people feel bad for their skin color, and you can't get that off of you, but then adopting a queer identity lets you out of the bind. And so it creates not just a social contagion, but a pressure pump to push kids into queer identities as a resolution to the identity crisis they're having manufactured through things like CRT. So James, you have been put into a bit of a timeout over the past few months, if you will, when it comes to Twitter. What have you learned from your mistakes? Well, I just got banned from Facebook yesterday, so not much, I guess. but I mean, permanently banned from Facebook yesterday happened. I didn't even really notice. Why? I made some memes mocking the Canadian policy of government-encouraged euthanasia. The government-encouraged suicide program that they have, the MAID program they call it. I made memes making fun of that, and Facebook permanently suspended my account for that. But I did learn that social media is a very toxic way to have big-scale conversations. I've lost my enchantment with social media, having been kicked off. It is both a time suck and like a psychological suck. You become less productive, more miserable. And so I've been using it a bit heavily lately for a few specific reasons, but I've also learned that putting it down is absolutely necessary to being well, to being productive. Your clarity of thought, your clarity of, in your relationships, the clarity of what you're doing with your life and purpose all go up. You're not thinking for the next 8 seconds and then you don't know what's happening. I learned that social media is bad for you. James Lindsay, thank you so much. Well, thank you.
Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.